Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Aparutade sangamatassa tawara ye sodavanta bamunjantu satang. So this afternoon, reflecting on Dhamma the way it is, and so there's very simple teaching about the way it is learning to trust awareness here and now. It's like this. Before you try to describe the way it is, so when you first hear this question, or what is the way it is, you're looking for something or wanting to answer. But the way it is for everyone at this same moment is conscious awareness, here and now. It's like this. Before you start thinking, before the first thought arises. It's interesting, this is the first day of May Day, and the day for celebration in some places. It's Ajahn Sumedho's father's 84th birthday. He's 84 today. And it's Half Moon Day. So these are words that we think, when we think of the 1st of May is a day full of festivity or springtime, but also it's in the month of May the Buddha gave after his enlightenment, gave his first sermon in Varanasi, and this first Dhamma Desana, called the Four Noble Truths, is my reference point for all the many years I've been ordained as a bhikkhu, because I found this teaching absolutely perfect. And yet it's simple, it's succinct, but oftentimes ignored and considered beginner's Buddhism. And you look at scriptural teachings, both in Theravada, Mahayana, Tibetan, there's enormous amount of other teachings available. But it's this simple teaching of Four Noble Truths is all that's really necessary. And so it's interesting, being brought up in a Christian family. My mother and father were devout Christians, where you're brought up to believe what you're told. And so as an innocent child, you think your parents, the priests, know exactly what they're talking about, so you're quite, out of innocence, you're willing to just accept what they tell you. Where with the Four Noble Truths, it's not about belief, it's not about believing them, but they're guides towards investigating the human condition that we're all experiencing at this time in these forms, these human forms. And he gave this first sermon to his 5 colleagues, friends, who he'd been practicing many years with in various concentration techniques. And it's not until the Buddha, or as the ascetic Gautama, as he was before his enlightenment, what is it that he discovered when he realized to be enlightened, when he'd been doing all these ascetic practices for 6 or more years? So some of us see our lives as ascetics, like we've got to go without and discipline ourselves and follow all the precepts and get rid of our egos, and we interpret the Buddha's teaching in oftentimes the way we're accustomed to think, the way we've been brought up, our cultural background, our social background. Because we tend to see ourselves as flawed, as unenlightened, as confused or imperfect. Only some kind of really extreme narcissist thinks they're perfect already, but most human beings that I've encountered in my life see themselves as flawed, imperfect, guilt-ridden, worried about dying. And so the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha talked about something so banal, so ordinary as their suffering. Now, why would he give his 5 colleagues who were experts at renunciation, why would he give them a sermon on suffering? It's a good question to ask yourself. Why would he choose suffering as his first sermon to his 5 friends who've been ascetics for so many years and have attained all kinds of refined, concentrated states, and yet are not enlightened? What is it, the difference between just refining concentration and enlightenment? And then there's 3 aspects to each truth. So the statement, there is suffering. And notice this, sometimes people say, the Buddha said everything's suffering, but he said there is suffering, which is undeniable. There is. We see it in ourselves, in our families, in our countries, our societies. So suffering is, rather than a curse, we can see it as a curse. It's a noble truth. So changing your attitude from your suffering, your anguish, your fear, your paranoia, whatever you suffer from, anxiety, worry, obsessive worry, old age, sickness, death, into a noble truth, because this is what we're experiencing. Birth has happened already, and we have these human bodies which are very delicate. We have senses, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, of course, the mind. And we identify with these conditions. We would like to make them so we're happy, so we're permanently happy. We'd like the best of the conditions that we know or experience through this form. Because we can experience happiness through what we see or experience through the senses. So it seems like a kind of downer, wet blanket we put on when they say happiness is suffering. So it sounds like a kind of depressing state where everything's miserable and suffering, just make the best of it. That's a kind of resignation to negative views. But when you see dukkha or suffering as a noble truth, then you become interested in it, rather than just trying to get rid of it. So the first aspect is the statement that there is suffering, there is dukkha. The second aspect is it should be understood. Now we can all resort to a dictionary and find out what dukkha actually means, the Pali word dukkha, which was translated generally in everyday parlance as suffering. We can see maybe there's something more to it than just the English word suffering. We kind of try to find more refined expressions of definitions for dukkha. But there is this suffering. Suffering is good enough. It gets the point across. And of course we want to be happy. We don't want to suffer. We want good health and youth and beauty and enjoy life. Enjoy the senses we have, what we see, hear, smell, what we eat, and on like this can be very pleasant, exciting, interesting, beautiful. So we see, like sensuous, a sensual person is always seeking happiness, a kind of Epicurean style of seeking, good food and pleasant surroundings and fun, games and pleasures. That's one way to deal with it, just eat, drink, and be merry. Or you can become a samana, where you dedicate your life to investigating suffering, which you experience, not trying to solve the suffering of others or the world in general, but just using your own sense of worry, anxiety, fear, the unpleasant sensations that we have through the bodies. Because we don't want any of these. We want to be fearless, brave, and noble. And that's natural. It's what's fearless and brave is kind of what heroic cinema is made out of, in romance, adventure, excitement, interesting life. But in the understanding of dukkha, we go inward. So the whole direction then, instead of seeking to define suffering through various dictionaries or translations, or resolve the suffering of the world in general, the parents, the family, the population, the climate change, the immigration problems, the wars that are inevitably part of the human experience. So this is very noble, to want to solve all the suffering of the world. But can we actually do that if we can't understand the causes of suffering that we experience just in this body that we tend to identify with? So this body is a teacher for us. To understand the body and its senses and the experience we have through this form, we have to go inward, because we can take sleeping pills or something just to knock out our consciousness for a while so we're not aware. But that's not a solution to the problems. You'll never get. Wisdom cannot operate through that kind of action. So meditation then, or bhavana, is looking inward. To understand suffering is like this. So we look inward at what we're actually feeling. And you begin to notice, you begin to look at, not critically, it's not to criticize anything you're feeling, but to recognize it is the way it is. When you wake up in the morning, how do you feel? It's like this. When you're hungry, what is it like? It's like this. Or if we're hungry and we just look outward, we said, we didn't get enough to eat today, and it's somebody's fault. So we tend to blame our suffering, unhappiness, on external causes, and that's not understanding suffering, that's just seeking to blame somebody or something, which is not the road to wisdom, to understanding suffering. Suffering is impermanent. It's not the permanent, it's not permanent. The ultimate reality is not dukkha or suffering. But when we're caught in the ignorance of just trying to get rid of suffering, rather than understanding it, then of course we can fool ourselves. But we all have to get old, suffer from illnesses, pandemics, old age, loss of loved ones. All of us have experienced the loss of loved ones. It's like this. Grief is like this. So it's not a dismissal of grief, but it's referring to it, beginning to understand it as something arisen due to circumstances. Grief has causes, loss of a mother, or father, or a child, or even a pet, a beloved dog or cat can feel like this. So it's not just you shouldn't grieve, like, did the Buddha, he was beyond grief, or we idolize images, we make perfect forms of Buddha images, we project all kinds of, that the Buddha didn't grieve or suffer in any way. They're just totally indifferent to life after he was enlightenment, but he spent the remainder of his life dealing with other people, with kings, with monks, nuns, lay people, rich merchants, beggars, insane people. And he didn't feel anything in regard to it, just totally walking like a zombie through the world of humanity with total indifference. Is that the ideal you want to create for yourself? Or is it to understand suffering? Then the third aspect of the First Noble Truth is suffering is understood. That means you've actually started looking inward. So that's the First Noble Truth. You're actually not seeking to blame external forces anymore, but you're first to understand suffering. You get the idea to be the Puto, the witness to your own sense of fear, anxiety, jealousy, worry. Even the healthiest human beings have to worry. There's a lot to worry about in the world today, with the climate change, with the wars in the Middle East, in Africa, in Ukraine. And then there's all kinds of ominous predictions about Armageddon, about the end of the world, about atomic warfare or artificial intelligence. But ever since I can remember, there's always been this kind of fear that the world is going to come to an end in some catastrophic way. There's been death and doom predictions ever since I remember, even as a child. Because we project that onto life. The possibilities of nuclear war, or will artificial intelligence, when that be like a Frankenstein monster that chases us, wanting to destroy us? There are all kinds of worries or possibilities, or fantasies, science fiction. It can be exciting, interesting movies are made of it. So when we believe in the world as our reality, then it is frightening. It's, anything can happen to us at any time. There's no guarantee we're going to survive even today. So there's, this realm that we're experiencing through this form, this sensitive form that we identify with, is the experience of suffering, because there is instability, uncertainty. The future, we can imagine anything you want that could happen in the future. Sitting right here in the temple, you can imagine the worst possible scenarios for the future of Europe or planet Earth. So we have this imagination which tends to go outward, worrying about COVID pandemic or other terrible possibilities for disease, pain in the future. Or we can sit here and feel guilty of the memories of the past, things that we shouldn't have said or done. And that's grasping memories, possible memories of mistakes you've made in life, or things that you're unwholesome or unkind or stupid. You can remember these experiences of the past, but what are they in the present? If we grasp these memories out of ignorance, then we suffer. The suffering is like this. Possibilities for the future are a kind of revolution where we find true happiness, where the whole world is working together for the welfare of all sentient beings on the planet, is a beautiful idea. But that's not really going to happen, because the very nature that we're experiencing through these forms is unstable and unsatisfactory. So how can you actually create a satisfactory future with the conditions whose very nature, very existence is unsatisfactory and unstable? So in the Four Noble Truths, the suffering, it should be understood. And so you understand suffering as what you're not thinking about somebody else's suffering, trying to resolve all their problems, but you begin to go inward. You look inward rather than outward. So in monastic forms, with its precepts, we see these as restraint or restrictions. We can feel suffocated by the Vinaya, because it's like a big kind of heavy tool that we tend to cling to that makes us worry and feel guilty. And so then we blame the Vinaya. I've heard monks criticize the Vinaya because they think it's kind of a lot of it is unnecessary and unrealistic, and you can, use your critical mind to see faults and flaws in it. But it is a tool to look inward, to restrain yourself, not out of fear, not because there's a rule about restraint, because it gives you something to remember, to refrain from saying things that you'll regret or are inappropriate, or taking things that you shouldn't, that belong to others, or killing other creatures. So just the direction of looking inward is suffering has been understood. You're looking inward now, not outward. Living in a community, isn't it? It's easy to blame, like the Bhikkhu Vihara, somebody that makes too much noise. We can say they cause me a lot of suffering. And so we tend to still want to resolve these issues by setting the conditions where people tiptoe, do not clump, and respect our privacy and our meditation practice. That's what they should be doing. But still that's seeing that your suffering, your practice is being disrupted by some external cause. and believing it. You think that if that person wasn't here, then I wouldn't suffer. So it's still going outward, isn't it? It's still seeing, even if it is, somebody is being very difficult or outrageous. We do experience suffering through people abusing us or criticizing us or not respecting us. But the suffering of the Noble Truth isn't about what somebody does to me, but how it affects me, what my habitual reactions to that kind of experience are. So I look inward for that. It's like this. When somebody disrupts my samadhi, it's like this. So I can see, it doesn't mean I don't feel annoyed, but I'm aware of the feeling of being annoyed or put out by that person who disrupted my concentration. I used to do a lot of concentration practices in the early years, and I kept getting annoyed by mosquitoes or other monks. I had malaria several times. That's something very annoying, very unpleasant to have. But still, it's a teacher. It's, the physical diseases we get can be seen in terms of opanayaka Dhamma, looking inward. Malaria is like this. And when I caught malaria, Luang Por told me, I said, I was complaining to him one day. I said, I can't practice meditation because of this. I have malaria. And in his own gentle way, he said, malaria is your meditation. And so I changed from just trying to get samadhi to witnessing the realities of getting this fever. And I began to see, look at it as an object that comes and goes and changes. Malaria is quite an experience. Getting a high fever and then suddenly it all falls away and you get this incredible sense of relief and coolness. Not that I think we should go around trying to get malaria, because that's still going outward. It's not malaria, but it's just the learning from the way we are, the kind of conditioning we individually have. The second noble truth is called the cause of suffering. And so the cause of suffering is grasping, desires. So this I found very enlightening when I first really started meditating on the second noble truth. Tanha is a Pali word that we translate as desire. And my cultural background, desire was pretty much limited to sensual desire, like food and sex. And when you blame somebody for being full of desires, it's usually around gluttony or sexual activity. But then in the second noble truth, suffering has three aspects. The sensory desire, the experience for what we see, hear, smell, taste, touch. Kama tanha, or sensual desire. And that's quite obvious. That's how I tended to interpret Dhamma. And then Bhava Dhamma is the desire to get something you don't have. Desire for enlightenment, desire to be free from all suffering. They can be very altruistic desires, very righteous desires. But still in the present moment, here and now, wanting to get enlightened when you believe you're unenlightened, when that's how you see yourself, then that Bhava Dhamma is desire to get jhanas, samadhi, desire for all kinds of things, and to get the proper monastery, find the right environment. So we oftentimes are dissatisfied in the monastery we're in because we desire it. We have an image, an imagination of some better place. So then the Bhava Dhamma is oftentimes our motivation, but it is a form of desire made from ignorance that we can reflect on. It's not to get rid of Bhava Dhamma, but to begin to observe it, turning inward. It's not that you shouldn't have it, but it's what most of us ordain with Bhava Dhamma, wanting to become enlightened, wanting to get peace, wanting to get something we're not experiencing in our daily life before we ordain. And the third kind of desire is vipavadana, desire to get rid of things. So this desire, vipavadana, I strongly identified with that, how much of my life had been spent being attached to desire to get rid of things I didn't like. So we see, like fear, I want to get rid of fear. I want to conquer fear. I want to get rid of defilements, kilesas. I want to get rid of sexual desire. I want to get rid of anger. I worry all the time. I want to get rid of it. How do I get rid of it? We begin to see this kind of desire to get rid of. We turn inward, and it's not that it's wrong or we shouldn't have this desire, but it is a way of learning by turning inward. Vipavadana, desire to get rid of some of what we don't want, is like this. So these are the causes, this grasping of desire. Desire is not the cause, it's the grasping of these desires. Blind, ignorant, habitual grasping of these desires without really an understanding or knowing what you're doing. It's just a habitual form of behavior. It's what we've been conditioned to do. Like in some Buddhist circles, they talk about killing your kilesas, your defilements. And so then I found this very unhelpful way to talk. To kill kilesas, defilements. It's like me, Sumedho, I've got to fight these kilesas and kill them. And that's what I'd been doing all my life, trying to kill what I didn't like, trying to get rid of it, annihilate it. So I found this Vipawadhanha very kind of one of my best teachers in monastic life. So I found that so much of my life had been spent trying to get rid of fear, self-consciousness, jealousy, worrying about what others think of me. About being alone, worrying about being alone and not having any friends. Worrying all kinds of whatever. There's so much to worry about because the future is unknown. So suddenly I had this insight into Vipawadhanha, and you don't kill it. You don't kill your defilements, you learn that they are impermanent, they're anicca, and they're not really yours. They're conditions that arise through other conditions. You begin to see them by looking inward and changing your attitude to see them as sankharas. That's what they are. They're conditions, phenomena that are impermanent and not self. They're not mine. Where the grasping of these desires always makes them very personal. My problems with greed and sexual desire, and my problems with fear and jealousy, and my problems with anxiety and worry, my problems, and then that's a form of grasping. I create myself as a separate person who has these problems. And it's easy to believe because that's what the society we live in encourages. So the insight, the second noble truth, is to let go. And that's not killing, that's not a destructive thing, it's not trying to kill evil forces or fears or greed or anything like that. It's letting go, suddenly relaxing. Not seeing it in a so personal a way, not identifying and believing that you are something wrong with you and that you've got to conquer these defilements. You as a person, as a monk or a nun, you are ordained to conquer your kilesas. You begin to see that that's just the ego operating. I am this person who's fighting the evil forces, the defilements, the kilesas. So this is a way of investigating, and then the insight, as I've said before, is to let go, which means, how do you let go of something? You don't have to throw things away or get rid of anything, but just release this grasp that you hold, the belief that it's yours and it's your problem and that you've got to do something about it. Or, it's modern psychology. We blame it on abuse as a child, or parental carelessness, or not being privileged socially. We suffer because we didn't get the proper education, or all the things that other people had. So we can blame the society, blame the culture, blame the world, blame God. And that's the person trying to blame suffering on some external cause. But this cause is internal. It's kama danha, bhava danha, vibhava danha, which is desire, wanting to get rid of. And then you reflect on your own body. It's a desire form. These forms that are sitting here in the sala are desire forms. This is a desire realm. Planet Earth is a desire realm. And I remember being brought up as a Christian where you're told God is a loving, like father figure, the sublime, perfect patriarch that created everything. That's what you're told. And then you experience, why did he create inequality? And, you look at the animal world and it's, the survival of the fittest. Why did God create dinosaurs? What was the purpose of creating dinosaurs? Or did cavemen, did Neanderthals or Cro-Magnon beings, could they become Buddhists? Why didn't God give that privilege to, not that God creates human beings to become Buddhists, but God creates. But that's the kind of logical problem one faces in these belief systems. Well, you notice the Four Noble Truths are not about metaphysics or the supernatural or magic. It's about being human here and now in this form and investigating, finding out for yourself. So these Four Noble Truths are directional signs. They're pointing the way, they're meant to help. Because they're all about understanding, going inward, understanding suffering, about the causes of suffering, grasping desires, and identifying with our desires. So that kind of grasping, that ignorant, blind grasping of desire is the cause of suffering. And it's just out of not knowing any better, being conditioned to grasp and seeing ourselves always as separate. We see ourselves as individuals, as separate individuals, separate from each other. So that creates problems, always this illusion of separateness. Because that's how it looks, doesn't it? It looks like we're separate. So and we believe that what we see is the truth, the real world. But then the third noble truth is the end of suffering. And they use the Pali word nirodha, which is the end of suffering, which is having understood suffering and let go of the causes, what's left is no suffering. Because that freedom from grasping, blind, ignorant grasping of sankharas or conditions or phenomena, we no longer do that. We're no longer obsessed with what we've been conditioned to grasp and believe. So nirodha is the end of suffering. And then we can think that I want to practice so I can realize Nirodha. And we're caught back in the desire realm, wanting to realize Nirodha as a person, as a separate person. And like people ask me, have you realized Nirodha? And as a separate person, the person, Ajahn Sumedho as a person, is a condition. It's a sankhara. How can that, and as long as I grasp this identity as Ajahn Sumedho, as my true belief in what I operate from, then there's no Nirodha possible, because Ajahn Sumedho is an illusion. It's not liberating to be Ajahn Sumedho. So what is Nirodha? Is it suicide or annihilation? No, it's the realization of your ultimate nature as Dhamma, your true nature, your real home, as Luang Por Sumedho likes to put it, is Dhamma, or the deathless reality, ultimate reality. And it's realized through letting go of desire. It's real, it's here and now, it's not something you can't do or don't, only special people are qualified. We can believe that we're special, or we can believe we're not special. But whether we're special or not special is still a belief. As a person, there's nothing special about that. Some people are more healthy or intelligent or beautiful or whatever, but that's not it. It is identifying with one's looks, with one's brain, with one's gifts, or with one's defects. Can a disabled person realize Nibbana or Nirodha? And so, yeah, the body, a disabled body is not the cause of suffering. So Nirodha then is ultimate realization of non-grasping. It's like this. And then the fourth noble truth is perfect understanding, samadhi, the Eightfold Path. They call it eight steps. It's not steps, it doesn't go anywhere, it's here and now. But samadhi is this perfect understanding. The path is here and now. It's non-attachment to the forms, to see the forms, and we can still use them and operate in our positions and in social situations and Sangha life, but we're no longer deluded by the illusion of our position in the society. That's not what our identification is. It's conventional only. It's not to destroy the conventions. Like, should we just get rid of the Four Noble Truths? They're conventions. They're words. All words are conventions. The word Dhamma is a convention. But Dhamma, from my perspective, is here and now and timeless. And that is perfect. It's not a sankhara. Dhamma is not a sankhara. And that's what you realize for yourself. You're not what you think or believe or have been told to believe. Your true nature is Dhamma, or freedom, enlightenment, nibbana, whatever these words point to, this realization. So anyway, I offer this as a reflection for this afternoon.